What's up, bro? So I just finished playing the first 16 hours of PTR, as well as streaming most of that live. So if you want to check out a VOD, you can do that as well. And I did that so I can give you guys a good first look on what Demon Hunters look like for season 27. So let's dive right on in. All right, so I'm gonna try to make this quick because there's quite a few little tidbits that I do want to go over and cover, just so therefore you guys can get a full understanding of all the mechanics and the things that are going on with the said artifact Crucibles. So we're gonna start with the cluster arrow one, the ray of light, because this is probably gonna be the most popular one, given that it's really the best one to use on our meta set. Firing cluster arrow concentrates its explosive force into a piercing ray of light, and it does exactly that. It shoots basically a straight shot of the arrow there. I'll zoom in a little bit, kind of take a look at the animation. So what you may have started to notice is that it has a pretty big wind up. Almost looks like it's trying to drop something. A lot like LOD Wave of Light. The visual itself looks a lot like Vengeance side cannons, but I think it is pretty neat that all of the damage from the cluster arrow from the rune itself is concentrated into one straight line, making it quite a bit easier to be able to access in terms of the higher GRs and also farming too as well. All runes have like a little different thing to them. So going on to a different rune, we got Maelstrom here. This is the one that generally gives us 3 rockets, but if we use Maelstrom here, we actually get 3 lines of the shot here. So I'll zoom in, you can get a little closer and look at that too. What's pretty interesting about this one is that the further you have your mouse cursor, the further apart the 3 piercing light spread. So the closer your cursor is, the closer the rays are. Pretty cool mechanic, but it also shotguns, so that means all 3 of these can actually hit the same target. And I'm gonna do everything without the sentry, just simply because I don't want to kill everything. So it's kind of what that looks like. And if I was to pierce them all together, it looks a lot like that, where it's hitting everything along that line. Pretty neat. It actually makes it pretty decent for single target damage. Then we also have Shooting Stars. Is much like Maelstrom in the sense where it does practically the same as that thing, but its damage is a little more consistent, but it's a little weaker than Maelstrom. Not quite sure why they programmed it that way, but it definitely is what it is. Dazzling Arrow, much of the same as Little for Bear. Instead of grenades, you get one straight line, except now this line actually stuns, as you see there. The one that's the most interesting to me is cluster bombs, because cluster bombs in general for M6, believe it or not, was our strongest skill. However, trying to hit with all 5 cluster bombs was nearly impossible to do. So we would go with Little for Bear because it was way more consistent. But now, since it's all concentrated into one line, what does it look like? Well, it looks like this. So you get a shorter line basically. Look at the old ruins, you can kind of see it here, where it's got a little bit of a range. It's not too bad, but it's doing all this damage in one shot. So this is a rune that's probably going to be a little slept on for the most part, because you're going to just automatically look at that and say, yeah, no way, it's not going to happen. But it does almost twice the amount of damage as cluster arrow Loaded for Bear does. So this is something that I can really see being used in like group play, with like, you know, top end builds where everything can be pixeled into like one small spot and things, and then that cluster arrow can just basically just destroy everything in the path. So that's for the good. The bad comes in is that, for one, the animation is extremely clunky. So I'm pretty sure as you're looking there, got the big stomp there. You can't cancel out the animation like you do with the regular cluster arrow with a regular, you know, as you see there. I can cancel out the animation. I cannot do the same thing here. So it's extremely clunky to use. So if you used to stutter stepping with this in the traditional M6, this is going to feel quite awful for you when you're trying to do this with M6 here. Another thing that's also a little bit broken, and it's a bug, I'm pretty sure it's a bug, and I hope it gets fixed, is that for whatever strange reason, Cluster Arrow Ray of Light does not proc Restraint. I don't know if you've been realizing this entire time as I've been doing this, but the Restraint proc never happened. Okay, so we're gonna go back to our runes and we're gonna do some shots again. I'm gonna come over here and realize that you do not see Restraint being procced whatsoever at all. It's kind of like, okay, oh, there goes my damage, right? So not quite sure why this is the case. It is the reason why you see me using rapid fire on my bar, because I needed a spinner to be able to proc the Restraint proc. So that's Cluster Arrow Ray of Light in a nutshell. It doesn't sound cool, doesn't really look that cool either, but it's pretty unique in its own right and can be pretty effective with the right setup. Moving on to the next one, we have, I'm just going to go over Vengeance real quick. I just put it on a random weapon, doesn't really matter here. Casting Vengeance unleashes a barrage of arrows that deal damage equal to a % of current hit points enemies possess. It's kind of a really weird wording. The percentage is reduced if the enemy is an elite or a boss. This effect cannot occur more than once every 60 seconds. So unfortunately, this is the one that I find to be the least useful of them all. And it does pretty much exactly what it says. The fact that it has a 60-second cooldown doesn't really make it useful for much of anything except for some interesting pushes. So let's trade this out real quick for Vengeance so you can kind of see what we're talking about. Much like the cluster one, the different runes have a different visual effect. But in this case scenario, it's just visuals. They don't really do anything more for you. It's just the visuals change. So with most of the runes, it's rockets. But with this one, it actually kind of looks pretty cool. So I'm going to actually use this one. I'll fire some rockets now. Okay. And that was Vengeance in a nutshell. I was firing some ice shurikens, it looks like. So it took a percentage of the damage off. And that percentage is basically going to be the exact same no matter what GR that you do. So I find this really useful on like a ZDH. So the next one is actually my favorite. This one. This is the UE multi-shot. This one is like super cool. So you'll shoot your multi-shot and basically your multi-shot will follow wherever the cursor goes. So as you see here, I'm just basically multi-shotting basically towards her face, and I'm actually using Odyssey's in to get a little bit more damage instead of using the Dawn for the perma vengeance. I find this to be a little bit more effective in terms of just more DPS in general. But of course, you don't really have to go with that. It's a little more complicated. You have to weave in your generator, entangling shot to get the damage buff to really make this happen. But I'm having a lot of fun with it, and it's probably like my favorite speed farmer now for the most part. And generally speaking, I would run this with tactical advantage so I can kind of move around a little bit more. But this is just to showcase like what it actually looks like with the multi-shots kind of firing everywhere. It's super cool, super fun. And honestly, this is probably going to be my go-to for like super easy farming versus something like God 6, which is what I would traditionally go for if I wanted some laid-back, relaxed farming. But I think this kind of takes the cake for that, just because of how cool this looks. So we won't finish the riff, we'll go back out. But you can pretty much do this with Nataya's, you can do this with Yuri, and basically use any generator you want. Any generator works, multi-shot works, not generator, sorry, spender works. You can do elemental arrow, you can do chakram. All of those are really cool and really fun to do. I just think it's kind of unfortunate that the best skill or the best artifact is basically stuck on our two worst sets in the Demon Hunter arsenal, and that is Yui and Nataya's. Unfortunately, the strafe artifact does not work with M6 Centuries, so it's kind of useless there, and it does not work with God 6 Demon Hunter because God 6 Demon Hunter buffs do not buff spenders, it only buffs primaries. So there's no spenders that you can use that's going to do any damage because there are no damage buffs to those particular spenders. So all in all, that's pretty much it. You can kind of check out what's going on the Demon Hunter side of things in the PTR. Currently, this is my current setup for Marauders using the Ray of Light Cluster Arrow. I tend to go with Odyssey's in currently just because there's a interesting little tech, I guess you could say, or tip for centuries that I'm not going to really explain it here. You have to catch me on my stream or catch my Demon Hunter guide video that I'll be putting out in a couple of weeks. I'll tell you all about that then, as long as that stays in the game. I think the Odyssey's End is going to be probably one of the stronger setups to use. Actually gives us a damage boost. And then when we go to UE, on the UE side of things, Odyssey's End again. Anything strafe related with Odyssey's End is kind of fun to me. I don't know why, but it is. I just wanted to just put this out there because you can kind of get creative with some of these items here. So yeah, and that's about it. So what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. I'll be making more of these videos as the PTR progresses, whenever there's more things to unravel and or to discover, or whenever bug fixes usually happen, and probably some more information on some meta setups. But until then, till next time.